European Union. And just to be clear, that is an agreement that delivers on the Brexit vote that we had in 2016 here in the UK, that delivers what I believe is at the forefront of people's minds when they were voting to leave the European Union. So at the end of these negotiations, we will ensure that free movement will come to an end. The jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice here in the UK will come to an end. The sending of vast sums of money every year to the EU will come to an end. We will come out of the common agricultural policy. We will come out of the common fisheries policy. And we will ensure, by not being in a customs union, that we are able to have an independent trade policy and do those trade deals around the world. And as you've heard from the President, the United States is keen for us. We're keen to work with them. And we will do a trade deal with them and with others around the rest of the world.
Well, singing emanating from below me here in Parliament Square now. This is the earlier Bring the Noise protest, and this morning we saw the Trump baby balloon, the Trump blimp aloft. But let's have a look at some pictures now in Trafalgar Square, the Stop Trump coalition. As you'll know, there are a number of protests going on today against the presence of the US President Donald Trump in the United Kingdom. This has been making its way towards Trafalgar Square, starting off from the Portland Place, Regent Street area of the city. And I don't think we've got any official estimate on the numbers of protesters today, but certainly we'd been told that something around 60,000 people had signed up to protest, but maybe as many as 100,000 were expected to be on the streets, not only in London, but in other locations as well. And of course, we are expecting protests in Scotland this weekend. President Trump heading up there for the private part of his visit to the UK, to his Turnberry Golf Club tonight. And so you can see Trafalgar Square there, another iconic London location, the setting for more protest today. Well, joining me here in Parliament Square, or near close to Parliament Square, overlooking the square, in fact, we have Professor Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. Scott, thank you very much for staying with us. We were watching the Chequers news conference together, weren't we? What were your thoughts listening to that?
Well, I think there's probably three major takeaway points once you get past Trump giving his reference to the bigliest specialist relationship to talk about. I think the first is that he put Theresa May on the defensive. She's at the point now where she almost effectively abandoned her own deal, the Chequers deal, by saying, oh, we're going to have a full UK-US deal, which is something that you can't have under that. That's how much the Trump pressure has put her in a corner, and the hard Brexiteers are going to capitalize on that. Secondly, even bigger than that, at least for Trump, was on 4 occasions he attacked Germany and the European Union. And at the end of the conference, he was so strongly attacking, Theresa May stepped in to try to just cut it off. That type of American attack on the EU and Germany is going to continue. And that leads to the third point, which is that the one person he treated as an equal in that press conference, the person who has the massive power versus America as a very big power, was Vladimir Putin in Russia. Now that overall, once you get beyond the superficial references that were made to cover this up, that's going to concern folks, I think.
One point of difference between yourself and some of the other commentators we've spoken to today is on whether this is Trump speaking off the hoof or Trump with a strategy. You think he's got a very definite strategy here, don't you?
I do. Now, a lot of what Donald Trump says, he starts to ramble, and you can see that in answers today, for example, when he was challenged on Syria. But on his core points, and these were the core points that came out of the Sun interview, his own interview, he tried to say was fake news.
Yes, he did, didn't he?
Yeah.
I thought for a second I'd misheard that, but he didn't. He did sound as if he was calling his own interview fake news.
He's not. But that grenade that he threw in, which is what's going to stick with people, that came as the result of meetings with advisors around him. Now, it may be a coincidence, but his former chief of staff, his White House former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, is in London this week talking about how to advance the Trump agenda. It may be a coincidence, but soon after his press conference, Nigel Farage, who is a close advisor to the Trump campaign, came on the BBC to talk about the great triumph of the president and how Theresa May now had to address American concerns about Brexit. So I think the idea of splitting up the EU, of making sure the UK deals with the US one-on-one, they came into town with that agenda, and they're going to think that largely they succeeded.
A little earlier today, you made a comment to me when we were chatting off camera, and you said you thought this was, the Trump presidency was the biggest threat to security since
1945.
Since 1945. Why do you say that?
Well, because since World War II, we've gone through the Cold War, after the Cold War period, the idea is that you had alliances, that you had some type of international order where it wasn't just one power that dictated to all the others. But those alliances are being shredded. They're being shredded economically through protectionism, tariffs. They're being shredded socially. We're hearing about these in the protests today by pushing back environmental rights, pushing back women's rights, and they're being shredded politically. There is no leader right now who can trust Donald Trump from one day to the next in terms of what they say. And the one person who likes that agenda to keep everyone unsettled, everyone on the black foot, again, will be the man that he meets in Helsinki. Vladimir Putin, whose strategy for years has been keep everyone guessing, keep the alliances insecure.
Yet polling we heard about yesterday, latest polling suggested that although he's unpopular with many, and although many people object to him meeting the Queen, more people were accepting of a working visit rather than a state visit. So is that a recognition of the office of President?
I think it's very key, and the protesters have made this clear, that they're not protesting the American system or the American presidency. They're protesting the man and his behavior and his policies. In other words, the idea is that far from upholding the system, Donald Trump is a danger to the system, and that these protests, in fact, are in line with trying to do something positive about it.
Scott Lucas, Professor Scott Lucas from the University of Birmingham, thank you very much again. Okay, let's just move away from talking about the President Trump visit for a moment and catch up with the latest weather forecast. Here's Sarah Keith-Lucas. Hi, Sarah.
Good afternoon. For some of us, it's another day of blue sky and warm sunshine, but we have had